today I am interviewing Greg and Beth Langston, and they are the founders of College Flight Plan. And today we're going to talk about helping your teen find their purpose. So hi, Greg. Hi, Beth. How are you?
Hi, we are great, thanks.
Hi, Jackie. Pleasure to be here today.
Thank you. And thank you for being here. So I want to start by asking you to share a little bit about College Flight Plan, what your purpose is, what you do, and then we'll go into the steps about talking about how to help your teen find their purpose.
Sure. Well, in a nutshell, we help students figure out what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are when they're in high school and what they're passionate about and naturally gifted to do so that they can choose a major that allows them to graduate in 4 years and have a fulfilling career. Or on the flip side, after being homeschooled, they determine that, you know what, college is not the right thing for me. I want to take a gap year or I want to go into a different profession. Then that's what I choose to do. And so, maybe it might be interesting if Beth tells you a little bit about how we got started in doing this in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you get started with this?
Well, we started with our own children. They were our guinea pigs. So back in the day, we actually raised our children most of their years before high school, they overseas. And so by the time our son was 13, he had been to 12 schools in 5 different countries. So we were on a fast track there. It was great though, because they could learn foreign language. We all learned foreign language, and we gained an appreciation for other cultures. Like in Singapore, the Singapore American School has 72 nationalities represented in K through 12.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
That's a lot. What neat experiences. So did you homeschool your kids all through those years since you were overseas?
Yes. Yeah, and when we were overseas, because I'm an education major, we did have to homeschool sometimes, especially when we moved to Australia. It's a different school year there. So we got there in November, I believe. So going into their summer and their summer break. So they start their school year in January or February. So we were homeschooling. Yeah.
Your kids are very used to being out of their comfort zone.
Yes, they are.
Homeschooling, different schools, different countries.
Different language.
How interesting. Different languages. Yeah.
Talk about Mexico.
Yeah, in Mexico, so they were the only English speakers in their school. So they would come home from school in the afternoon, and for 2 to 4 hours, we would have the Spanish-English dictionary in one hand and their homework in the other. And we would just plow through what they had to get done, translating everything. And they did it well, and they're so capable. Kids are so much more capable of rising to the challenges that we put before them than we give them credit for.
Yes.
They're very capable.
Absolutely. I think the more you can step back as a parent and let your children do what they need to do, the better off they're going to be. And that's hard for parents. It's really hard.
It is hard.
So you started out by helping your kids get ready for their futures. Now, did all of your kids go to college, or did some go to college and some not?
They all went to college. They changed their minds about what they wanted to study along the way. We'll get into that. Giving the kids opportunities to explore what they think they like to do. And then sometimes when they're exploring that or going to work with someone in that profession, they decide, oh no, that's not what I want to do at all. But when we were overseas, we thought we needed to get back to the States to start preparing for that college application process. We thought we needed to be there by freshman year. But when we came back, we were very disappointed that nobody in their schools were helping them, discover their strengths, weaknesses, giving opportunities to explore different occupations and things.
Find their purpose and their goals and so forth.
Yes, and Greg, as an executive, he overseas, he was running these corporations, and he was provided with hours of this great executive training that helped him gain skills and gave him assessments that improved who he was as a person, his performance as a leader and as a team player. And he kept saying, why have I had to wait 20 years to learn this? And why aren't we teaching these things to our kids right now? This is when they need to know what they're good at, what their goals are. And so that's when we started on our own children as our guinea
Okay.
pigs.
So now
With-
you have college flight plan where kids come in and you work with them, teenagers,
Yes.
on finding their purpose. And so when we were talking pre-interview, you were telling me how much money families can save by sort of working through this before they go to college. Did you have numbers to go with that? I can't
Absolutely.
remember.
Sure.
Okay, so tell me about that.
If you figure that an in-state school is on the low end for all in expenses, let's say 40,000, and you have an Ivy League school where we sent our son, which is $80,000, you're talking, and the fact is, if you save 2 years of college, you're talking about saving between $80,000 and $160,000 by going through the self-discovery. And the reason I say that is because many parents don't know it, but only 40% of college-bound students graduate in 4 years. A full 60%, 60% of them graduate in 6 years, and that's because 60% of them change their majors 3 times at least because they're not sure what they want to do.
I was in the 60%. Absolutely. So, and I'll share a quick little story with you. I knew what I wanted to do when by the time I was in 8th grade, I wanted to be an interior designer. I spent hours going through the Sears and Roebuck catalog and like picking furniture out and how I would decorate things. And do you want to know what happened to me? Like
Sure.
I really knew what I wanted. And this was before interior design shows were on TV, right? And so I had a terrible counselor is what happened. In 8th grade, he called us, each student individually, into his office. And in 10 minutes, that man ruined my dreams because you're so susceptible as a child. And here's what he said to me. He said, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be an interior designer. And he actually said, well, that's just something that rich men's wives do. And I literally dropped my dream then and there. And because I thought, well, I'm probably not going to marry a rich man. You know, I was just a normal average kid. And so
What a horrible thing to say.
Isn't that a limiting belief right there, actually? But I dropped it, and it was literally, I floundered my way through college, didn't know what I wanted to do. Finally, I just started taking classes I really liked. And I finally thought, well, I like activity and I like teaching, so I'll be a PE teacher. But I have to say that was not my natural calling. I mean, I did a decent job, but it's not what I was born to do. And so I dropped that dream. And I think that's a terrible thing. And actually, though, now I feel like I wouldn't want to be an interior designer today. Oh, and I didn't finish my story. I was literally sitting on the couch nursing my firstborn child, watching Trading Spaces, and it like hit me. And I went, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an interior designer. And I just looked back with, oh my gosh, but isn't that so sad that I really would have been very good at it. It's really what I wanted to do. But now I am doing what I feel like I should be doing in this stage of my life with Homeschool Think Tank. But I can actually look back to one assignment in all of my school years where we were told to create a commercial, and I created rainbow diapers. I used my mother's dish towel, colored rainbows all over it, put it on my great big Bugs Bunny doll, and did a rainbow diapers commercial. And I loved that project. It was so much fun. And in many ways, you know, starting a business, you're sharing. You have to market, right? So you are sharing your products with people and what you offer to the world. So I'm like, oh, that was something I was truly born to do. But something like you guys did probably would have saved me. I think you saved way more than you said, way more than, say, what is it, 40,000 a year? So
40 to 160,000.
Yeah, 160 to say $320,000 for a 4-year program. But if most people finish it in 6, not only are you spending more on those extra years of college, but you are losing ground in your earning potential because you're not earning money with that degree that you could have. So I actually think you're probably closer to 500,000 to $1 million if you really think about it, depending on your occupation.
Well, another data point that's, pretty amazing that speaks to the opportunity to help kids is that 87% of people 16 to 29, 87% have no purpose or meaning. So they don't know what they want to do. And then you compound that when you have people who Jackie, like the person who said to you, "Oh, you can't do that." I mean, you just throw even more, gas on that fire. And so that's why it's so important for students and the parents of those students, whether they're homeschooling or not, to help the kids figure out what is it that they're good at, what should they do, because they want to and they are capable of figuring out what it is that's important and what they're passionate about. And that's why we are so focused on doing what we're doing.
And finding
Okay.
those opportunities as parents, we need to see what our kids are interested in and find opportunities for them to explore that interest. Our son is a great example. His whole life, he thought he wanted to go into the medical field. And so as he got older, he thought, oh, I think I want to be a surgeon. And he had the opportunity to go to work with a cardiovascular surgeon and then a neurosurgeon. And after his time with them at work in the operating room, he came home and he said, that is not at all what I want to do. And so thankfully, he didn't waste his time and money going to school all those years to only find out that, this is not what I wanted to study. He went into the world of finance. So sometimes they think they have an interest, but when they actually get the practical, applicable, experience with it, they're like, oh no, it's not at all what I thought it would be.
Yes. So how can a parent like myself help their kids find their purpose? Clearly you help them do this too, but how can I help my child? I have a 17-year-old daughter and she is thinking she wants to go on one route. And as her mom, I'm thinking that's not necessarily where your natural genius is, just like what I did, right? I went it wasn't a bad route. It just isn't where my natural genius was. So how do you help your kids find their purpose?
Well, what we do in our program can easily be replicated at home. For example, if you wanted to ask your daughter, identify 8 people who are vested in her, who she trusts, and who will give her strong feedback, good and bad. Say, these are the things that you do really well, 3 things you do really well. What are 3 things you do poorly that you need to improve upon? How do you add value to other people? And also, what majors do you think I should study, or professions I think I should study? If you've put that on a Google Doc and ask the people to respond to them
To a survey.
to a survey done by yourself, then they're going to get 200 data points of information back to them that's going to say, this is what I'm good at, this is what I don't do well, this is how I add value to others, and these are the majors and other things that we have included in our process that will help provide a real clear picture from people who care about your student, your daughter, as to what he or she should do in this particular case. And so that's something that can be done that's very important.
That's fascinating. I've never thought to do this, to actually, it's one thing because as a parent, you tend to just have these one-on-one conversations with your kids, but you don't necessarily say, really ask others and not just go have a general conversation, but put it in writing, send them an email and ask them to give a thoughtful response, not just an off the cuff response.
Correct. And this is where we took the knowledge that I had from working in the C-suite, where we have 360 assessments as an executive, and we automated that process. And so we include that, and it's confidential, so the student doesn't know who is giving the answer.
Though sometimes they do guess.
Okay.
That was my mom.
Yeah. And there's value to that because then you can get skewed. And so that's why we prefer to have it be confidential. And so part of the discovery process that we have is to do that. We also help the student go through a discovery process in terms of their own core values as to what is important to them. And if I can share for your listeners, if they would envision a cross-section of a tree with the root system being your values, the trunk of the tree being your purpose, that holds up your branches, which are your objectives and your goals. But it all stems from the strength that your root system or your values have, excuse me. And so that's why we believe it's very important that values are chosen by the student to see what values they won't negotiate on, that they will answer questions based upon those values when they're not with their parents or with their guardians, and will make decisions accordingly. And that will support their purpose and their objectives following that.
That's fascinating. I love that. So I'm actually, if you notice, I keep looking down, I'm taking notes. So
that's a good thing.
The tree, you have your roots or your value. And what did you say the trunk is? Your purpose.
Right.
Purpose.
But for you to get to your purpose,
what are your leaves and branches?
Those are your objectives. Those are your objectives
goals.
And your goals. And so in order to really get clear on what your purpose is, you need to have that 360 assessment in terms of your strengths and weaknesses. You then take with us, you also then take a Kolbe assessment, which is an assessment that identifies how you instinctively problem solve. And the interesting thing is I've taken it 3 times over the last 25 years, and I've not changed a point, not one point. It's one that your conation does not change. Your IQ and the way you interact with other people socially, cognitively and effectively, that can change as you mature, but the way you instinctively problem solve remains the same. And so that leads us to help the student to develop what we call their distinct natural abilities, their DNA, which is important when you are a young person, when you're not clear on what you do really well. And so armed with the self-discovery that the students have already gone through, they can say, listen, I'm really good at this based upon 8 people providing me that information. These are my values. This is how I instinctively problem solve. And they craft a paragraph about themselves that says, this is my wheelhouse. This is what I do really well. So that when I'm in school and I'm asked to volunteer, or I'm on a job and I'm asked to volunteer, or in a club and I volunteer, I'm going to do something that I do really well. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. I have a thought around that though. And I tend to think you should, I don't know, I have split thoughts here. Part of me thinks you should stay in your wheelhouse and do what you do really well. On the other hand, I think you have a lot of growth when you're willing to step out of your wheelhouse and do things you're not good at, but recognize that part of your purpose for doing it is to improve yourself.
Completely agree.
Grow.
Correct. You're basically building muscle tissue in those areas that you know you're not good at. But for example, many kids don't know what they're not good at. They may have an inkling, but if they get 8 people coming back and saying you really are not a good public speaker, then that might be something to say, you know what, I need to go to take a Dale Carnegie course, or I need to figure out a way to stand up in school and say something and just practice that in that environment.
And you may not be a good public speaker yet, though. That's Greg's favorite word, yet. There are a lot of things that we can learn to do in life. And what we found is kids, they want to know what they do well. That gives them some confidence. They want to know where they belong, and they want to know how they can make a difference. And so that's what we try to help them discover.
So with all that information that they've collected, and I must point out that part of the program is that they pick an accountability partner who helps them through this process. And why, you might ask? If somebody writes down that I'm going to lose 5 pounds on a piece of paper, the likelihood of doing that, unless you're super diligent, is probably single digit. If you share with your friends and your whole ecosystem, your relatives, that you're going to lose 5 pounds, you will be shamed if you don't do the 5 pounds. In other words, there'll be social pressure on you to do that. Or if you share vocally with other folks that you're going to do that. If you have an accountability partner, statistics show that you will have an accomplishment of 95%. And so that's why we have the student, we encourage them to pick the accountability partner. And you'll find that typically it's not a friend. Typically it is a parent, or it is a relative, or somebody that they say, this person's not just my buddy. They're going to give me the cold, unvarnished truth in terms of this is what I do well and this is what I don't do well. And so we believe that's important to help the students go through that process.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And you know what? I guess you could say I have had an accountability partner in my business, but when we went on vacation toward the end of last summer, it's sort of a business coach, and we fell off the bandwagon, or I fell off the bandwagon, and he called me about 2 weeks ago, but I actually had COVID and I was really sick and I didn't call him back. And I need to call him back because I need that accountability partner. I make a lot more progress when I'm working with him. And so, yeah. And I was working with him for like about 3 months this year, maybe longer. I can't remember, 3 to 6 months. And I made a lot of progress in that time frame. Now, granted, when you're sick, you're not going to make as much progress, but
Sure.
but
you're allowed to be sick, you know?
Yeah. Anyway, that's all beside the point. But the accountability partner is huge. Say those numbers for me one more time. I want to jot them down, and I want my listeners to hear them again too. The percentage on having no accountability partner to having an accountability.
5% if you do it yourself. 65% if you share with others, and 95% if you designate an accountability partner who is responsible to hold you accountable and you allow them to hold you accountable.
Yes. Okay. Responsible to hold you accountable. Yep. And, and that I would say that's go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was saying that this allows them to then establish their purpose statement based upon all this information that they have. And they craft a purpose statement that says, what is it that I want to do that's bigger than me, that I'm passionate about? And they have a lot more information now rather than just pulling it out of the air. And they then establish aspirational goals for what we call 4 different success elements. One is health. The second one is wealth, which in the next 5 years, while you're going through school, it's educational accomplishment, because educational accomplishment is your job. In the future, wealth will be a measure of how well you perform in your job. Educational accomplishment is what you'll be doing the next 5 years. The third success element is wisdom, what wisdom you're gaining. And number 4 is relationships, your relationships with yourself, with your parents, with your friends, with your grandparents, with your God, whoever that might be.
This is awesome. I love how you have this broken down. And actually, you may have noticed, I glanced up and I have my vision board right over my desk. And
Awesome.
so, oh yeah, I spent a ridiculous amount of time. I have 2 vision boards, one for HomeSchool ThinkTank and one for my personal life. And I can see them both. So, and I'm sort of looking at them and I've got them grouped. And I really do have like health in one area. I have, my family, my habits, fun in another area. So all of my areas do break down into the things that you just mentioned: health, wealth, wisdom, and relationships. But it's done so cleanly. I love my vision board. It's like all these just pictures, but here's what I really need to add. I know. Let me see. I'll hold it up here for you.
Love it.
I'm going to show you. I'm going to have to cut this out of the podcast. So podcast listeners, I'll put a picture on here. So there's my vision board right there. And now it's a lot of words, right? But there are certain, the one I come into the most, I don't know if you can see it here, grit.
It's a great
that word is, very, you have to have grit to succeed in life. And so,
another one there, you had grace in there too. So you need to give yourself grace when things don't go as you expect.
Yes. And I actually think I have a podcast episode that has the word grace in it because of that right there. Because I do have to give myself grace, and I so wish I would have had your program when I was younger. I'm going to have to talk. I had my daughter look at your site, but sometimes it's all in your approach. So let's say a parent is listening to this episode and they're like, I want my kids to work, or kids to work with Beth and Greg. This sounds amazing. And I've learned so much just from this one single episode. How do you approach your kids and get them on board? Because, this is a parenting podcast, so we're mostly talking to the parents. Yes. And the way you approach parents and kids is different. So how do I get my kid on board with this?
Well, we'll give you an example. We just have a new client and a gentleman from another country had his son sign up for this. And you could see the tension where the son is standing next to him. They're from an Asian country. And the father is saying, my son doesn't do this. My son doesn't do that. He doesn't do this. And the son is standing right there next to him. Yeah. And so the son is like, oh my gosh, my dad's putting me in another one of these programs, just put a fork in me. And the fact is that is not unusual, because kids are saying, listen, I'm running around with my hair on fire. I got too many things to do. I'm so busy. I've got my friends. I'm in school. A lot of it's a waste of time, but I don't have time to do something else. And so what happens with our program is we initially have a meeting with the parent and with the student. And we say, listen, this is going to be all about you. It's not about somebody else. It's all just about you. We're going to uncover and peel back the onion as to what you do really, really well. And it's all in 2.5-minute segments. In other words, you're not going to have to listen to somebody talk for an hour. You're going to listen and watch a video for 2.5 minutes on average. You're then going to and you can do that on your mobile phone. You're then going to go to your workbook, which is also mobile optimized, and you can fill the information out. And we are going to take you step by step to figure out what you're uniquely capable of doing. And so we've met with the student several times. And the first time he's like, okay, yeah. The second time it's like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Then they get their feedback from the 8 trusted advisors and they're saying, oh, this is what I'm doing really well. Oh man, they think I'm good at this. I think I'm good at this. Yeah. And so then they begin to have a transformation. You might want to talk about that.
So in the end of our process, they actually present what they've learned about themselves to their parents. And it is so cool to be in that room with them, or on a Zoom, now that we have Zoom, right? With them, because you can see the transformation, not only in the student, but in the relationship between the student and the parent. The student has so much more clarity in knowing their values and their strengths and their weaknesses and their purpose and their major. And the parents are like, wow. And then they see the student's confidence in clearly understanding and articulating what makes them unique. And they need that when they start to go through the application process and writing those essays. And the student feels they have a little bit more control over their lives because they have actionable plans and goals. And the parents are sometimes in tears at that point, saying, I've known you for 16 years and I didn't know this about you. This is so great. And it helps lessen the tension of deciding what to do next in life, what occupation they want to pursue.
You said something that I want to respond to a little bit, that I've known you for 16 years, 17 years, whatever, 18 years. And I didn't know this about you. In this last year, I've had some experiences with my oldest where it's sort of funny. You put your assumptions about people on them, and your assumptions about even your own child can be really off the mark at times, because you just have your bubble of the world, your view of how things are. And sometimes you learn that things aren't quite what you thought. And, and maybe your kids are behaving in a way because that's just the expectation, right? But I think there is something to be said for releasing your own parental, I don't know if you could call it the viewpoint or who you think your child is, and allow them to be who they are.
Exactly.
And it doesn't mean you you don't recognize their strengths, right? Or weaknesses or things like that. But you've got to release your children to be who they really are. And that's
Yes.
hard.
It is hard. And in our Colby assessment that we give our students, sometimes they come out in transition, it's called, meaning they do not have the freedom to be themselves because somebody either in school or at home is a little too controlling over who they should be. We need to allow our kids to have that freedom to be themselves.
And so, example being, we have some families where there's a history of lawyers in the family. The father's a lawyer, the mom's a lawyer, the uncle's a lawyer. And so it's like, Emma's got to be a lawyer. And Emma goes through our process and says, listen, I'm smart, I'm capable, but I would suck at being a lawyer. I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to be an architect. And here are the reasons why I want to be an architect. And I can make a very good living and I can be passionate about it. And this is part of my purpose, to be an architect. And that is very freeing for both sides of the coin, because the parents are terrified that the student's not going to do well and is going to come, as we say, we want college flight plan to fly out of the home and fly into college and then fly into a career. We don't want them to fly back into our basement. The same thing is, we want our kids to flourish and to grow and to provide for themselves and to create a legacy that makes you and them proud. And going through the self-discovery, regardless of what you do, is extremely important. And parents cannot expect teachers to do this for them, not because they're not capable. It's because there are an average of 424 424 students in high schools in the United States today per college counselor. There's no way.
Per college or per high school counselor?
High school counselor.
Okay.
There are 424 students per high school counselor.
And they recommend 200.
Right. And in California, where we are, there are 900 students that each counselor has to deal with. And we have one instance where, one of your students was asking for information. You might want to
we were doing the college application process, and she had to list her activities and awards, and she couldn't remember when she had gotten certain rewards. So she went to her counselor and said, could you look this up for me? I can't remember what year it was. And he said, I don't have time to do that right now. I'm dealing with 400 students, or 900 in his case, that need my attention. So we recommend to parents to write down the accomplishments somewhere or put them in your notes in your phone. Anything that your child gets, or the students can write this down, because we think we're going to remember what they did freshman year or the summer before freshman year is when it all starts. Any activities, extra courses they take, awards, accomplishments, involvements, community activities, that has got to be recorded. So you have it somewhere and you don't have to go to the counselor at school to find out later.
Yeah. So Greg and Beth, this has been amazing. And I learned a ton from our conversation, and I really hope our listeners did too. I don't know how you couldn't. So I wish I would have had all that you have to offer when I was younger, because you really, I think overall, when we're young, we don't just naturally think like this. And here I am pushing 50 and just learning all of this stuff. Think of what a difference that could have made over a lifetime, right?
So true.
So, and honestly, how many more people you can help over a lifetime and serve, right? Because I find that is where your purpose really is exciting, is when you share it with other people. So thank you again. And visit homeschoolthinktank.com/college flight plan to learn more about Beth and Greg Langston and how they serve teenagers and families. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.